Listeners, the miracle moment is here. You see, we have a renowned speaker, coach, podcaster, and author. And yes, she'd be the first to tell you she's got issues, and she fully recognizes the struggle is real. But she's also brave enough to step in when you throw your hands up and say, "Help, my Bible is alive." I am, of course, listing off several of her great books. Joining the Aro Podcast today is my new friend, Nicole Unice. Nicole, welcome to the Aro Podcast.
Do you think that you're the first person who's done that? Because people love to make a pun out of all book titles. You missed one, but we'll let it go. So, but it was pretty strong. It was pretty strong. And I always makes me laugh. So
that wasn't original. That was not original, in other words.
I mean, it was still strong though. Like you just came in with a really strong voice. So it was great.
All right, so the strong awesome. Voice did. All right, what book did I leave off? You got to correct me.
You left off "Help, My Bible's Alive," which really working that one in to the midst. It's the one that doesn't fit with the others. So.
Oh no, I said it. Let's review the tape. I said she's brave enough to step in when you throw your hands up and say, "Help, my Bible is alive."
Oh my gosh. That was a perfect experience that we just had that's related to the miracle moment, because I stopped listening to you because I was thinking about what I was going to say back to you. And look, I completely missed your intentions. Excellent. That was an amazing job. Best ever. Loved it.
Best one ever. Well, thank you for joining us. We're done for today. No, thank you.
Thank you.
Nicole, I don't exactly even know where to start. You do so much, and author, speaker, leadership coach, podcaster. I'm intrigued by your coaching. I want to start there with your coaching. I want to hear a little bit about who your primary audience is, who you're speaking to, and then I have some specific questions on that and how that works.
Sure. Yeah. If I can, I'll back up just a little bit in my story. Like many of us, I had no intentions to find myself in this position. I just didn't even know that this is like a job that people do. But what I do know and what I have, and I think I love asking people this question as well, like who you wanted to be when you grew up, like what were you passionate about? And when I look back in the rearview mirror of my own life, I find that the thing I've always been really passionate about is the question of, can humans really change? Like, can we really grow? Like, can we transform beyond our childhood, beyond our temperaments, beyond whatever that, those patterns in life might be? And so my career, I started in fitness. I was in full-time fitness. Like, can you change? Then I was a therapist. So I was kind of engaging the, can you change in the sort of psychological mental health space? And that was a Christian counseling degree. So kind of combining theology. And then I'm now a pastor and coach. So it's sort of that same thread, even though there's many different jobs and it appears many different ways. I think the heart of my vocation has always been the same. So seeing life as different assignments, that God can give us a vocation. We can have this passion that might be inside of you that you've been built with, but the actual assignment can change. So I find my current assignment is really in leadership spaces where I help teams and leaders understand the culture that they're in, their own personal transformation, and then how that affects the teams and organizations that they lead. So my day job, so to speak, right now is really doing that work, consulting with churches, nonprofits, companies in that space. And my passion project continues to be writing and, communicating in whatever aspect I have the opportunity to do. So.
Okay, I want to drill into that question. And your basic question which is, can humans really change? What have you found there?
Change is really hard, but not impossible. And we need all the help that we can get. And I actually think that the great story of every human's life is their story of overcoming and transforming. Most people minimize their story. Unless they have a very dramatic, kind of objectively dramatic story. They kind of feel like, no, I'm just a normal person doing normal things. But I actually think that everyone's story is epic and incredible. It's just a matter of mining what that is that, story of overcoming, that story of transforming. But I think people, especially adults, we need way more help than we think we need. We really need a lot of help. And most of us come to a place where we think, I kind of am already supposed to know this. I'm supposed to already have it together. I'm already supposed to know how to do like emotional resilience, even though literally none of us has ever learned or been in any class, right? That you'd learn that. Maybe you had an amazing parent who was able to navigate and shepherd you through that, but most people don't have that. So we get to adulthood and we think, oh, I feel some shame around this because I feel like I should already know how to do this, which is also how people feel about their work. But in reality, all of us are like just figuring it out. And if we have the humility to engage and be like, oh, I can grow, I can learn in this area, then we're set up for really amazing things.
That's an interesting term, that concept of supposed to. I'm supposed to. I'm supposed to. It's all. That's probably a sibling to should. And I heard recently, I heard someone say, which I love. They said, "Hey, I said should," and they said, "Hold on, don't should your pants. Don't should your pants," which I thought was great. But that concept of supposed to, that's a real inhibitor. And almost when you start saying that to yourself, you start going down, to your point, a shame spiral. And you say, gosh, I'm supposed to know something, but I don't. And then you feel down on yourself, and it's so counterproductive. Is that one of the questions I had about your coaching? Was you talk about people getting unstuck, which I like that. I would love to hear your perspective, going a little bit deeper on the supposed to or shoulding your pants. And then even deeper into what are some other ways that people are getting stuck, and how do they get unstuck?
Yeah. I mean, I love and think that that's I think it's more a part of almost everyone's story. Some people are really aware of it. Some others aren't. A friend and colleague of mine that we work together a lot, we've been exploring this idea of what's every leader's shame story, because every leader has like this other part where they're like, I have this relational failure, or I had this, occupational failure, and I haven't really reconciled that. And what happens when we have failure, which inevitably we all do, we have to cover somehow. If we're not going to heal from it and redeem it, then it's got to be covered. And so then we end up with more posturing, more striving, more trying to prove that we're something or somebody. And it's just not, it doesn't really lead to a joyful life. It doesn't lead to a well-paced life. And that's a lot of people's story. You can still be out there doing great things, and great things are happening, but maybe internally you're not experiencing that same level of really feeling like you're content, you're at a pace that's sustainable, you're really enjoying the ups and the downs of life. So a lot of times when people get stuck, I was actually just leading a group last night, and we kind of talked about the 3 areas that I think that we can get stuck in. It's if our values are out of alignment, like, so we either are unaware, everyone has values. It's just a matter of whether you are naming them or not. We're either unaware of what our values are, or we're living out of alignment with what they are. That's the first one. The second one is resiliency. We are not really, we don't have the skills, and we haven't intentionally grown in the skills of emotional coping, what I do with setbacks, how I understand failure. What does self-care look like? And then the third one is boundaries. So boundaries are the energy and resources that we have to offer the world. And we either live outside of our boundaries consistently, or we aren't even aware and haven't done the work to understand what our resources are, the energy management system that we have. All of us have treasures to offer the world: time, money, gifts, emotional capacity, which by the way is finite. It's not an emotion. We don't have an unlimited resource of just engaging emotionally with life. So if I don't have a proper understanding of boundaries, values, or resiliency, those are the places where people end up getting stuck.
I'm curious, this gets a little personal question, but how are you on those 3: boundaries, values, and resiliency?
Are you? Terrible. Yeah, no, I mean,
I'm
growing. Let me say that. Yeah. I'm growing. Yeah.
Oh, listen,
I'm not terrible. I'm not terrible because I had a friend who was a math teacher, and he was a middle school math teacher, like an 8th grade math teacher, super cool guy, like just the kind of guy you would want to have like teaching middle school math. And I said to him, like, why do you teach math? And he's like, because I was so bad at it. And I thought, that's actually what makes the best teacher. When teachers are intuitively good at stuff that they're teaching, they're not usually that good at teachers. And so the reason I'm really open with I try to be really vulnerable and open with my own life. And, my first book was called She's Got Issues, was because I think that people who are open with the way they struggle in life are better teachers than people who intuitively are good at certain things. So for me, this has not come intuitively. It's required work and
Yeah.
the understanding of how to live an intentional life and why do I need to name values. And I tell, people I've been through a big transition in life in the last, like many people have in the last 4 years. Sure. And one of those things was naming a personal value, which was so basic, a basic personal value, and realizing I need to engage again in a very intentional process of aligning my life around this value. And I just wasn't living according to that value. And because of that, I was, experiencing physical stress. My body was under stress. Sure. I was having sicknesses and things happen that weren't normal. I was out of accord with my emotional capacity. I was burnt out. I wasn't experiencing joy. And even just 4 years ago, had to realign, what is that personal value and what does life need to look like in order for me to live into that? And making changes like that is incredibly difficult because we often have to make sacrifices. We have to step out in faith. We have to do really hard things. And we usually need a lot of support. And I had support. I had coaching and counsel and spiritual direction. And so the work I do comes out of my own, doing that. And I would say in this season, I feel like I'm sensing a restoration to that alignment around those things. Yeah. And what that brings is clarity and confidence. It doesn't mean that life is easy. And that's really important. I'm like, life is not an up and to the right. Positive psychology says, if you just do these things, life's going to go like this. You're just going to flourish in every area. I'm like, that's patently untrue. It's completely ignores reality. But clarity and confidence can be, I can even name that I'm in a hard season and I'm choosing to adjust my life around this hard season. And I can feel peace in that, doesn't have to mean that it's great. It doesn't have to mean that it's exactly what I want it to be, but I can still have peace and contentment and even joy in it.
I love that. And you said something earlier, and I think this ties into it. You said something that was interesting. You said you get to a point where you can enjoy the ups and downs of life. Mm-hmm. And how do you, this is related to this, how do you enjoy the down? How do you actually, it's one thing to be aware you're in a tough season. It's another thing to know you're fighting through it and hey, it's wartime and get your war hat on. It's an entirely different concept to enjoy the downs of life. How does one go about enjoying the downs of life?
Yeah. I mean, often it's enjoyed in the rearview mirror, right?
Yeah,
it's after you've gotten through it. But resiliency is the ability to look back at difficult seasons and say, what is it that I learned or experienced that I never would have otherwise? Yeah. It's not being superficial or fake. It's not saying I'm going to put my game face on and act happy when I'm not, but it is the ability to say there is a silver lining to every season, no matter what. And I may not know what that is right now, but I'm going to be able to look back and see that something beautiful can come out of this time. One of the things that grows in hard seasons is our heart. If you allow hard seasons, if you actually live in them, your heart expands for other people. You generally become less black and white about life. All of a sudden, everything that is our meritocracy, individualistic consumer culture that says if you do these things, you will get this result. When that doesn't work for you, you become a person whose eyes open to the hardships and reality of life in a way that grows compassion and grows grace and makes you a more loving person and honestly a better person in every aspect of life. It makes you better in your family, your marriage, and your leadership when you are not a person who thinks hey, if you do these things right, it's going to work out this way. And that's why when leaders go through massive failures, which by the way, I don't know any strong leader who by their mid-40s does not have a cataclysmic failure or hardship or break in their story, which has been really interesting to me to think about and wonder about that and wonder what's happening in us when we go through something like that. But I can look back and say, wow, I'm grateful for that because my capacity to have compassion and to know that there's a lot of mystery in life and to not rush to solutions and conclusions in people's lives is much different now.
I want to make sure that wasn't hyperbole because I think it was really profound. you said that every strong leader by their mid-40s has had a massive failure. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's my sample size. I'm not saying
Yeah.
maybe I shouldn't say
That's a
every,
good,
but
it's a
I
big
should
sample.
say it's a
Yours is
big
a big sample
sample.
size. Yeah.
It's a big sample size. And, you know, there's this whole concept of vulnerability that courage is being the one to be vulnerable first.
Yeah.
And in opening up, oftentimes, let's say sharing your story with others, what you discover is the other person is like, oh, me too. Like I
Yeah.
went through that. And so in a difficult time in my own story, I was seeking counsel, right? Seeking support. And as I sought that support, I get these stories back. And these are people that I'm like, this person's amazing. Like this person has it all together. This person's leadership story has definitely been up and to the right. Like my experience of them is that
Yeah.
way. And yet time after time after time, I hear these stories that are like, I have this relationship that hasn't reconciled. I have this hard thing that I can't even explain. My family's been through this incredible challenge that we continue to go through, but we're, not public about it. Whatever that like sort of touch of suffering is maybe the best way to call it. And it's, I don't know, maybe I'll write about it sometime, but I'm like, what's going on in
Hmm.
us that maybe makes that like a necessary part of the journey to break into like a full leadership, to fully live intentionally. So I don't know if it's certainly not everyone in the whole world, but
Yeah,
a
sure.
shocking number of people that I did not expect. Let's put it that way.
That when I've gone to counseling or therapy in the past, one of the most comforting things that I've experienced in that was when I would describe this complex situation that I was in to my therapist, and
Mm-hmm.
she gave it a title, she gave it a name, which told
Mm.
me that the fact that it has a title means that other people have gone through it, and that maybe
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember her exact words on anything, but that concept alone was so reassuring to me that
Yeah.
I'm not alone, that others have been, and to your point here, not only have others gone through it, but leaders and people, and you're in good company. And you said something that was brilliant there. You said it's maybe a necessary part of the process.
Yeah.
What an interesting, but again, like you look at people, like people who live in Hawaii, where the kids running on the rocks and stuff like that. And because they have such, feet that are conditioned to it, where if I were to go
Mm.
walk on it, I'd be ouchy the entire time. But it requires that difficulty. It requires the pain to go through it.
Mm.
Um, One of my favorite song lyrics is by a Mumford and Sons song, and it says, "A brush with the devil will clear your mind and strengthen your spine." And so
Mm.
these, not a full-on encounter with the devil, right? You don't want that, but a brush with the devil is just
Mm.
that little reminder that, hey, this is how you get a little bit stronger through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, I know it's good. And yeah, it is a mystery on why that would be a necessary part, but maybe it's just part of the human experience too,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
the human experience is actual mountains and actual valleys and
yeah,
seasons of summer and seasons of winter. And how do we make space for that? I'm doing a series right now on Ecclesiastes on my podcast, and it's real challenging because you're engaging with these big questions of like, does any of this really matter? And I'm
right,
like, how pertinent to our day for all of
yeah,
us to engage with, how do I rightly number my days, really? Like, what does real life look like? How do I make space for pain? Like we talked about, like how do we enjoy hard seasons? Like maybe we're not going to enjoy them, but maybe how do I have compassion for
yeah,
myself in hard seasons? Like a small example of that is I've come to learn, and I had a mentor like sort of lead me through this. He said, anytime you have mountaintop experiences on a weekend, so let's say you're like leading a conference, leading a retreat, whatever, do not make any decisions the following week. Like that was like, it's like make no life decisions. And I would add to that my other thing that we've both of us have talked about is if you preach on a Sunday, expect a bad Tuesday. And
right.
it's like it's a little axiom, like, hey, leader or person, if you're going to have these big, incredible experiences, expect the down. Like, don't be surprised by the down. Don't be like, what's wrong with me because of the down? What if you actually plan for it? You're like, you know what? After a big expenditure like that, I'm going to be really tired, probably
Yeah,
emotional on Tuesday. So maybe I make space and care for myself by just riding through it and not trying to make that go away or piling my schedule so that I'm just like burnt out and frustrated and worn out and not good for anyone. So those are little examples to me
yeah.
about maybe growing in intention and resiliency is that kind of care and grace for our own humanity, like our own frailty and limited capacity.
I love that. It reminds me of it's a great saying and axiom, and it's been, used a million times, but that, the phrase that makes a happy person sad and a sad person happy, which is, this too shall pass. You're on the mountaintop, you're going to go to the valley. You're in the valley, you're going to go to the mountaintop again. And not being the type of person, my brother Jacob says this, not being the type of person who believes that the situation you're in currently is the situation you'll be in always. And it's those type of people who just get their feet taken out from them again and again and again, and just knowing that it's going to pass, that every storm in history has passed except for the one that's currently happening, right? It's gonna move on no matter what.
Well, and that actually helps you like rightly number days of flourishing too. Like it's actually able to say like, I don't want to take this for granted. Like I want to be fully in, like I want to celebrate too, which is another thing leaders are bad at. It's just like actually being present in like, isn't this great? Like, isn't this cool that we're even doing this right now, you and I? Like, how great, how amazing. And then that lifts your heart, right, in those good seasons as well, makes you present there.
That is true, because the way that people usually look at it is it's almost a ho hum. Even when things are great, you say, well, it's the valley's coming Tuesday, you know what I mean? And so it is good. What a good thing to have both the knowledge that it's not always going to be this good, but that it's good right now. That's okay. You can have both of those, right?
Yep. Exactly.
So interesting. I want to talk. So you've written a lot of books, but I want to talk about your most recent book, The Miracle Moment, and the subtitle there, how tough conversations can actually transform your most important relationship. So I want to begin. What is I'd love to have background on the book, but the title itself, what is the miracle moment? What is that term?
Sure. Yeah. So the miracle moment is a term we came up for to talk about the moment, not the moment of sort of avoiding being missed in a conversation, being dismissed, being discouraged, being misunderstood, because that's inevitable. Like that's going to happen no matter what. Like we're not going to get rid of that because we're human beings. It's the moment after the moment. Like what happens next after that moment when you have that sort of feeling like I want to give up or blow up or shut up, right? Like that's kind of how we usually react in conflict, or how we react in a conversation where we just don't feel seen or heard. Yeah. What would happen if in the moment after that moment you were different? And not that your partner was different, not that your coworker was different, but what if you were different in that next moment? So basically we dissect everything that goes into being different in that next moment as a human being, and what that can do, especially in your love and work, is sort of my unofficial subtitle, is like how to get what you want in love and work, because that's really what it's about, is we want people to know and hear and see us, and we want to move toward our desires. And oftentimes it's the communication of that gets sort of wonky and missed in those relationships.
This is such a common thing that almost seems it's so amorphous, it's so huge, how to handle something like this. How did you come to this topic, and then how did you begin to gain clarity on that? I love, by the way, those three: the give up, blow up, show up. What precipitated this, and then how did you begin to get your arms around such a huge topic?
Yeah, the same way a lot of I think good books start is it's out of an actual problem that you're in. Yeah. So I was starting to work, I had my own experiences of, I worked at a growing church for almost a decade, very fast growing. So lots of change, lots of scale. And that I had been in that experience. And then I had now been in other experiences where I'm with all these other people, as well as relationship coaching and my own background as a therapist. And I just had this moment where I was like, good people with good intentions who want the same things, who like blow it up. Like it goes vastly wrong. And I think one thing that I noticed as I was I'm sort of the person who's outside of the experience, but I'm deep in it. This is the sacred gift of counseling, coaching, whatever, leadership, is I'm now really involved sort of in this like very vulnerable, intimate space with two people. I'm not the person. So I'm hearing and experiencing their dynamics, and also in most cases talking to them individually. So I sort of know each of them and I see it come together. And I was having these moments where I'm like, wow, like it feels like someone should be the villain. It feels like someone should have bad intentions and that's why everything's going wrong. But in reality, it's not. It's great people with great intentions who a lot of times actually want the same thing. But something about the tools in the toolbox when it comes to communicating are so lacking that they can't move forward. And so what happened was I was like, interesting, I'm seeing the same thing. Like I've seen this in therapy. I've seen this as a relationship coach. I've seen this as a leadership coach. I'm now working with teams and I'm hearing their different perspectives. And I'm like, wow, this person thought they said this. This person heard it completely different to the extent where they're like traumatized by it. Like they're like quitting their job or they're, you know what I mean? Like they basically don't trust the person at all. Like it broke their trust completely. But I know like that is not what the person intended. This is weird. So I just started gathering basically all the tools that I've used over the last 20-ish years in all those different environments and said like, what really matters here? Like, what are the steps that you need to take to change the way that this happens? Most of us we don't have a lot of communication tools. Most people, they've got like one or two tools in their toolbox. Like they got nothing. They're like, you either understand me or I withdraw and give you the silent treatment. And then maybe you say sorry. And then we just don't talk about it again. Like and they're like, and that's what my mom did. So that's the only thing I know. Like we just don't have lots of levers to pull or like ways to engage. And so I thought like, what if we just make like a relationship 101 book that puts a lot of tools in people's hands and says like, hey, you can use these in any of these environments and they're probably going to help you do better than you're doing now.
I'd love to hear about some of those tools. You know, what are some of those like go into that? And to your point, when someone intends one thing, someone else hears the other thing. Can you give us some examples, some of those tools that you discovered and uncovered writing the book?
Yeah. I mean, the one that I say, like, if it was my dying day and I was like shaking someone's shoulders and I'm like, if you could just hear one thing, like, this is the only thing I need you to know about your life. This is the one that I say, because I'm so passionate about like people taking their agency back, if that makes sense, their like ability to change. And I want to say to them, hey, who is it that you want to be? When it's your 90th birthday party and people are toasting you and they're not talking about your accomplishments, they're not talking about your relationships, they're actually like saying, you are this person. Like, what words do you want them to say? Okay, it is your responsibility to move toward that. So no more saying, this person's making me impatient, this person's making me frustrated, I can't have this thing because of this person. You've got to decide within yourself who you want to be. And then when you're in a conflict, you can ask yourself, what would it look like for me to become the patient person that I say I want to be? Like, how am I going to engage in this conversation? It's a completely like one-way experience where now every relationship that you're in is an opportunity for you to grow into who you're becoming rather than an impediment or an obstacle on your way to who you think that you're trying to be. It truly, like, that mindset shift changes things remarkably. Because now it's like, oh, what opportunities did you have today to grow in becoming an open-minded person? Well, I had to deal with a really judgmental person. Well, how did you do in becoming a more open-minded person? So now it's all on me to start to think about the tools I have and the ways I engage. And when we get our agency back in frustrating relationships, things really do change. It's remarkable. Does that make sense?
It makes it makes so much sense. I don't even know where to begin on that whole concept because it's transformational. And you said, you know, you when you begin to identify yourself as a certain thing, you become more like the person you identify yourself to be. You may not be that, but if you say that, you become more like that. I think of, so my the Aro co-founder, Heath Wilson, he and I and our wives were going to a football game one day and his wife was running behind. And Heath is just a prince of a person, and he's so patient all the time. But his wife was running late, so it was my wife, me, and Heath sitting in the car waiting for Misty to come down, and she's running late. And he said, "Gosh, we're gonna be late. We're gonna be late." And she gets in the car, and I'm fully expecting him to react like I would, be like, "Ugh, you know, we're gonna be 15 minutes late." And you know what he said? He said, "Oh, you look really pretty."
Yeah,
that was it. And as a result, She felt great about herself. She was probably expecting, oh, I'm running late. But instead, you look really, that changed everything. And what that did for me, it makes you want to be more like that, but be more like the person you admire in some ways.
Yes.
And so if you almost like third party it, well, I know someone I would admire do this. Like no one would want to be like the type of person who's impatient like that.
Yeah.
And it's just so that's just such a transformational concept, especially with kids. I mean, I think that's one thing. If a kid from that, I know you have kids, I'm curious if that was for you, if that's that sense of personal responsibility, if that was kind of a cornerstone of your parenting and what you'd seen.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, Joey, like if you think about it, can you think of a word for yourself like that you would want someone to say about you at your 90th birthday?
The word I want is present. I want
Present.
people, and because Nicole, I struggle with it because I'm always, my mind's always somewhere else, and because I am, I'm stealing glances at my phone, but I want people when I'm with them for them to feel like they're the most important person in the room. Because you hear people say when they've met Bill Clinton, as an example, they say, it's like the whole room disappeared and he was just there with me. And you think, holy crap, what a superpower for someone to be like that. So I think that would be it for me, would be that. What is your word?
So I would say, I mean, present is one of those like values that I talked about that changed my life. Cause I was like, how do I start to be present? What am I doing that's keeping me from being present? So present is definitely one. I think open-hearted has been another one. And the reason I asked you, Joey, what yours is because then you've got that thing, right? So you're like, okay, this is who I want to become. I have like a metric now that I'm looking at life. And then you can sort of take the next step in the toolbox, which is to become your own scientist. So this is another sort of concept and in the book, we call it curious, not condemning. So now I'm going to be curious about myself. I'm going to be like, okay, I want to become this person who's fully present. And now rather than like rolling into a shame story when I'm not fully present, I'm going to say, ooh, I'm going to be my own scientist. I'm curious. Let's rewind the game tape. What happened then? What was going on with me? Like when I showed up that way and I snapped, I was impatient, I spoke over them, whatever, I interrupted. What was going on with me? So now I'm able to start this process of thinking about the way that I live my life in a way that's not shameful. It's not saying like, you suck again, you messed up again. It's actually saying, ooh, I wonder, like, let me think about the factors and the variables that create a space where I'm being more present. So you mentioned your phone, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, I know one thing. Like if I've scheduled too many things in a day and I've made like back to back, what I find is that I'm not present in anything. Now, that may still happen sometimes, but at least you're starting to become aware of what are the environmental factors, what are my relationship factors that I need to like think through and put in place so that I can start becoming this person. Then conflict becomes just a piece of a growing edge in your life rather than like this big scary thing that you don't know how to handle.
I love that, and I'm sure this was you chose this specifically, but being that scientist, becoming your own scientist that removes the emotion from it. Scientists are not emotional. Scientists are factual. You look at the data, you look at the facts, and then you can make your assessment. And so that I assume that helps. If you look at it as I'm going to analyze this as opposed to judge this, then it continue to become more productive as opposed to just jumping down a shame spiral. I interrupted myself. I interrupted myself in my own mid-sentence to my daughter because I looked at my phone the other day, and I've told that story probably 10 times. And it's, I think why, Nicole, even just talking about this, and I'll send you the therapy bill after the show, is that I haven't fully processed that moment. I tell that story again and again, almost jokingly, because I haven't really thought through it. I haven't really processed through that. I feel bad, and it's become shameful to me, even though I'm talking about it lightheartedly. It's become shameful to me as opposed to me actually analyzing it and thinking about what can I do differently next time? How can I become the scientist as opposed to going down a little bit of a shame spiral?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is where like naming reality and then understanding that we're all kids on the inside trying to find a way to cope and make the world okay.
So
and being able to say like, man, I looked at my phone in the middle of talking because being important makes me feel okay about myself. And I chose to feel important over to feel present. And that's because it's part of my story. I never felt valued maybe as a kid or whatever that story is. Like, this is just a part of my story, but I don't have to be that person anymore.
Yeah.
And that means I get to go back and say to my kid, maybe something that no one's ever said to me as a child, like, hey, you know, dad was, you know, sort of confused about what was important at that moment. And I want you to know that you're the most important thing to me. Sometimes I'm going to have to be interrupted by work, but I always want you to know that I want to always be listening to you when you're talking. And it's this rebuilding of trust, right? Which is what we talk about in the miracle moment all the time. Like, there's a whole chapter on like, how do you learn how to apologize correctly? Like, you don't apologize with excuses on the end. You don't apologize with like, I was going to listen, but you know, you actually just say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. What can I do to make it right? And that's it. And that's part of like deciding, oh, I'm trying to become a person who's present. So it doesn't actually matter the environmental circumstances that led me to not be a person who was present. I can deal with those separately. This is a mistake that people make in marriages a lot. And actually bosses make this mistake a lot too, where they do something wrong and they say, I was sorry that I did that wrong, but here's what you did to contribute to me doing that thing wrong. Those are two different conversations and they should be had separately. The first conversation is, there's no excuse for me raising my voice because I don't want to be a person who raises my voice. It actually doesn't matter if you were chopping my leg off. I don't want to be a person who raises my voice. So I was wrong when I did that. I lost my temper. I'm sorry. What can I do to make it right? Now, I might later and separately in a disciplined kind of situation be like, hey, it's not okay when I tell you 3 times to do something and you don't do it. So we're going to need to talk about how we're going to make that better, right? So, but if I go to my kid and say, I raised my voice at you, I'm sorry, but I told you 3 times to do that and you didn't, I just made it, I didn't actually apologize. It's not even an apology. So learning how to separate it, I love to help people unlink crucial conversations from apologies. Like, if you were wrong based on the person that you want to become, just do the reconciling conversation. Don't do the, we need to fix this other thing. Because you've just realized that you need to fix that other thing. And I tell a story in the book about that, where I like snapped at my husband during COVID. I was like at the coffee pot. He like asked me to go on a walk with the dogs. And I was like, do you think I have time to go for a walk? I was like so wrong. Like, he was so gentle and so kind. It was so obvious that I was wrong. But I had to be my own scientist, right? And ask myself, well, what was I thinking? What was going on in my head? And what is happening inside of me? And later that night, or even the next day, we did go on that walk. And I said, hey, I was wrong to snap at you. I didn't want to do that at all. But I actually did realize some things that I haven't told you. I'm really anxious about this book. It was actually the miracle moment, which is funny, but it was due. I'm really anxious about this book. I feel resentful because it feels to me like I'm responsible for the kids during the day and you just go into your office and close the door, which is perfectly okay. We haven't even talked about it, but it turns out I feel resentful about that and I haven't told you. And most of my resentment is related to this insecurity about being able to hit this deadline because nobody expected us to be in COVID. So he turns to me and he's like, well, why don't I book you a hotel room for the weekend and you just go away so you can spend time? And it was like this beautiful reconciling, like the conflict actually created connection because I worked through it on my side of things. And as it turns out, my husband and I want the same things. We both have good intention. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times we start feeling like a person is the problem when in reality, like we just need to learn how to be more vulnerable, to communicate more clearly, to invite, that kind of conversation. It was just this really, really cool moment that came out of me snapping at him at the coffee pot in a way that I didn't even realize what I was feeling or thinking. And I needed to do the curious, not condemning, like, okay, it wasn't right to snap at him, but obviously something's going on with you. So let's process what that is and then engage in what you need, and ask for what you need, which is what happened on that walk later that day.
That's almost where, back to the earlier question, how can you enjoy the lows? There's one way. You just got to know there's something great. If you can embrace it, there's something great that's going to come out of that, because it's almost, in some ways there, I would be curious if you hadn't blown up, if you would have tried to just kind of half feel those emotions or half process them, you wouldn't necessarily had an opportunity to really do a full scientific deep dive on yourself, right? Without the
Absolutely
explosion.
not. I would not have processed it at all. I'm not a person who likes to process emotion. I like to avoid it. So it takes messing up. I mean, you know what I mean? It takes snapping at the kids. It takes being anxious or whatever, controlling, for me to realize like, oh, something's going on. Oh, red flags. Like I should pay attention this is a big stop sign for myself. And the only person responsible for understanding my emotional world is me. I can't wait for someone else to figure it out for me. It's not their job. It's my job to say, okay, what's going on and how can I communicate what's going on without expectation necessarily. Like I didn't have expectation that my husband Dave was going to like fix my problem, but it turns out it was even better than I expected. Like his ideas were better than I would have had for myself, you know.
I love that. Gosh. I want to transition to something else. Do you have another 10 minutes?
I do. Yeah.
And we'll come back to it at the end, but the miracle moment, let me just plug that right here. That's some transformational stuff. I hope everybody goes and buys a copy. You are currently doing How to Study the Bible. It's an ongoing podcast, and you just finished Let's Be Real. And I want to go to the very last episode 100, where you ended it. And I think it's 18 minutes, 15 minutes. I think everybody should listen to that, because it was such a lesson in ending something. It was a beautiful thing. And I remember George Washington talked about when he stepped down, he thought that was one of the most powerful things he could have done, is show how you end things and how you show how you transition power. I almost thought this was worth starting the podcast just so you could end it the way you did that. It was so beautiful. And I think it applied to relationships, and, how do you how to know when it's time to end something, and without intention, it's easy to let things end badly. You are going to laugh at me. I remember hearing a line on The Bachelorette several years ago.
Excellent.
And where one of the bachelors said, I just lost all credibility, didn't I? I'm done.
No, I love it. I'm like, are we also quoting Hamilton? Because do you want me to sing part of Washington's song? Because I will. I mean,
okay, so that's
Hamilton's
the second Hamilton.
A big deal in my family.
Well, okay, so I'm going to back up real quick. When you were talking about your own personal agency, there's a line where Burr sings, he goes, "I'm the one thing in life I can control."
Yeah.
And I've used that with my kids 1,000 times, because we all love Hamilton. We say that, and you're right. When the Washington scene on ending is, that's funny. We have a little Hamilton going right now. So I want to, you walk through 3 things, and I don't know if you recall them, so I can remind you if you can't, but the Bachelorette line, anything good that ends badly, was the line from the Bachelorette. And you're saying,
interesting,
without intention, it's easy to let things end badly. So you gave three thoughts on what to do if you're ending something. Do you recall those? Can I give you
I think I remember the first one was evaluate the why, like why you started.
And is that the first one? It is. And it was so freaking good. Like, and I'll remind you, because I want to hear you elaborate on it. You say you go back to that why. Why did you start the thing that you're now ending? Why did you start it in the first place? And then you said, what is the why? And does the why still apply? Will you elaborate on that? That was so brilliant.
Yes. First of all, I really think it's important for people to know I'm actually super sad about the podcast, because this makes it sound like it was an easy thing to do. And darn it, if people don't come up to you, like I must have had 5 people in the last 4 days be like, "I'm so sad about the podcast." I'm like, well, you and your 20 friends are sad about it, but I just can't keep doing it. And so I want to say that, because like, just because it ended, and I know it was the right thing to do, and it 100% is the right thing to do, I still am really sad about it, because whenever you're a creator and you create anything, it's hard to let it go. It just is, even though I know it was the right thing. So I want to name that as a reality, because maybe it'll make it even easier for people to engage with asking those questions. But I had to put on, again, like you put on your scientist hat and you say, I need to evaluate this from the most dispassionate position possible, because good things often do keep us from better things. And I could sense in my heart, there is no space for new vision. That's what was actually happening. Is I've gotten to a place where I've added thing after thing. They started because of COVID. They didn't start out of a 10-year strategic plan where I knew this was going to be the thing. It was like these things started out of a season of change.
Yeah.
And they've come, more and more have come, right? And then you get to a place where you're like, do I have fresh vision? Do I have enough space for fresh perspective? Do I have excitement do I have any of that kind of energy left? And I just didn't. And I didn't feel like I was in a place where I still need that energy. I'm not like in an institution that I'm building that I didn't need that. So So I know that like having that dispassionate perspective is important, but I do want to name is actually still hard. So, but this is what really helped me with Let's Be Real. I was like, okay, wait, why did this start? Because we all, leaders and people, we do stuff because we want to solve a problem, right? Or we want to answer a question. And I've started a lot of things. That's a big part of my ministry and vocational career. And all of those things have started from a problem. Like I started writing because I looked at the bookshelf and thought, there's nothing here that I would give to a person like me. Like I'm in the bookstore and I'm like, this stuff doesn't land for me. And here's the thing, that why is no longer true. Like the publishing industry has changed in the last 12 years and that's not true anymore. But then I had to ask the question, so is my why still relevant or has the why changed? And does this thing still meet that why? So for publishing, that answer is yes. Like the why is different. I'm different.
Yeah.
So I can answer that why and continue to do the thing. But for Let's Be Real, it was like, what's the why and has the why changed? And it had changed and I didn't have a new why. So then it's like, well then what's behind this? Well, it makes me feel good. I like, what am I serving? What am I doing? So I actually think it's important for people to do that. I have a friend who would say, don't plan on anything for more than 18 months, which is short. But generally, I think it's great to sit and ask yourself, like, these things that are in my life, like, is the why still there? Has the why changed? And is it still one of my like top priority whys? And if the answer is like, yes, the why's changed and no, there's not a new why, then we have to ask them, what am I doing and why?
That was the one that really stood out, because if you could have that constant evaluation, and you even said you had done that process before on the podcast and you determined, the why still applies. So we're going to keep doing it. And you walked confidently in that. And so it's just that constant reevaluation of that was really powerful. And you just touched on this, and this was one of my questions, because your third point was celebrate what has been. You celebrate the experience. And my question for you was something you touched on, and you talk about celebration, but is there room for mourning? What do you do? What about the person who's going through something that may be a difficult thing? They're walking away from, they're ending something. And how does mourning the loss of that experience or the ending of that experience, how do you properly process through that?
It's as if you knew what my next book was about, which you don't. So that's kind of fun. But so my next book coming out next year it's called Not What I Signed Up For. And it's about navigating unexpected seasons. And I'm actually like editing the chapter right now on loss. So I think that navigating loss is super important. Because a lot of times we relegate grief to death. Like that's where you can grieve. And we don't actually understand that there are seasons of mourning that come, honestly, I think they come linked to seasons of joy, because we have that season of joy or that season of flourishing, and then that all good things come to an end, and we've got to move past it and through it. And how do we do that well? Well, I think the way we do it well is we allow ourselves the human gift of mourning and of loss and of naming loss and of not trying to make loss go away. So one thing that people often do is they try too quickly to like redeem loss, or to say like, yes, this thing happened, but it's leading me to this thing. And they're not actually processing. It's just like you with your phone. Yeah. You're like, I'm telling this story all the time. Like it's a lesson learned. And I'm not actually like letting myself be like, oh man, I never thought I'd be the kind of person who would do that to my kid. And I definitely am that kind of person. Like, I just want to like take a moment to like feel that, and then to receive grace, receive forgiveness, move forward. But I think with things that we end, there needs to be a space to say, that was good and it's over. And it may never be like that again. Like I can be sad about that. One gift that I felt like people have given me in different seasons is being able to name, that was wrong that happened to you. That's it. Not that was wrong that happened to you. But it's great because like God has good things for you in the future. It's just like letting it be, just naming. A lot of people need help. That happened in counseling a lot too, where someone would tell me a story of hurt or trauma, and part of the counseling technique, but really like the human technique, is to stop and say, I am so sad that happened to you. Like, and the feeling I have when I'm going to make me emotional. Like the feeling I have when you tell me that story is I'm sad and I'm angry for you. And like actually letting that be enough and just letting someone feel validated that they've been through something really hard and you don't need to fix it is incredibly healing for people.
To me, I think if someone were if I had gone through something and someone just did that, to me, that what they've just done is given me permission to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Exactly.
Doesn't that just open up like, hey, you go ahead and feel it and be pissed off and you process through it or then be sad or whatever it is. But that permission to feel, and how many of us just walk around without the permission, especially when it comes to grief or you've been violated or whatever, just to feel it. With no agenda beyond that.
Exactly. It works on the flip side too. Because the other thing is people often don't feel permission to celebrate. Like to say like, it is amazing that you did that. Like I don't know any, like that's incredible. I have so much respect for like what you did, like whatever that thing is. People don't also feel that, like the feeling of joy, of pride, good pride, like, just really wholesome pride and accomplishment, because we've been made for both of those things. Like we're made for joy and we're made for mourning, and we give each other a gift when we make more space for that emotional expression. It's so vulnerable. It's intimate. And that's what people are like real freaked out. In our culture, we're in such a disconnected world where we see each other through screens and we consider that social interaction, that when we're like, oh, this person sees me, and they see this deep thing in me that is this vulnerable, true essence of who I am. It is such a gift because it grows us as human beings. It grows our trust and our love for each other in a way that I think is how we were designed to flourish.
I think of this as a dad, and I think about even when I am telling my kids that I'm proud of them. So if my daughter did great in a volleyball match or something like that, I think that my inclination would be to almost tie a lesson even to my celebration of them. So something like, Gianna, you played awesome. See what happens when you work hard? No. Don't just leave the second. Just, you did amazing, period. Right. And it's almost like we're tying addendums to every little thing that we say, whether it's celebration or mourning or whatever it is. And just rather than just letting it be, that's, as a parent, I think there are a million.
Well, and I would say, I'll give you one little reframe for that too. That is my favorite. Like for being a counselor and a pastor, I literally never read one parenting book. I was like, I don't want to read it, but there's one parenting book that I loved. Okay. It's this little tiny book it's not even like a popular book. It's called Different Children, Different Needs. And it's based on basically doing a little bit of an understanding of like, what do you think your child's disc profile is? Like, it just gives you a little bit of observation to do. And then what you are, and basically some of the pitfalls in your personality types, how they might come together, and some of the opportunities. But in there's this little bit that these guys write about, their counselors, and they write about this idea of connecting your praise to a character virtue that you see in your child. So it's not a lesson learned, but it's more like, oh my gosh, you were amazing in that volleyball game. And I know I've seen you work so hard, and that kind of hard work is integrity. Like you have integrity. And so it's not, because what we don't want, of course, is for our kids to hear us praise their accomplishments and for them to translate that to mean when I'm successful, dad loves me. Right. Yeah. But we want them to see, like, it's not the A that I care about. It's the fact that I saw you so diligently doing your work. Like that aspect of your character is diligence, and that is incredible. So you're like celebrating character. It's like what you just said. Like if your kid said to you, like, Dad, you didn't pick up your phone once when we went on our ice cream date. That's you being present. I'm so proud of you because you were present. Right. Because it's what you want to be, right? So I always pass that on. I pass that on to managers because I'm like, we never outgrow that. Like connect what you've seen to a character virtue that you are celebrating, and give that gift to your kids, to your mentees, to people that you like, name, like when you do that thing, like I grow, I'm encouraged in my faith because you're so patient. It's like what you said with your friend when he complimented his wife, right?
Yeah. That's right. And then to your point, that reaffirms their identity. So then they become more like that person that they identify themselves as. Yeah. I love that. I didn't prep you for this question, and with my apologies, but we ask all guests this question.
I love crazy questions.
It's not even crazy, but it's a little bit introspective. the Aro Podcast is all about conversations with people who strive to live intentionally, and you're clearly in that category. So everybody has a little bit of a different definition for this word, and I'm curious, what does intentionality mean to you?
It means trying to care about my life as much as I think God cares about my life.
Oh, man.
That's what I would say.
That's really good.
It's
Trying to care about myself, to care about my life as much as God cares about my life.
Trying. I don't think I can even get close, but it's like, it's like taking life seriously without taking myself seriously is another way I would say it. Like, wow, like what a gift we have to live this life. And I can't believe I get to like engage in it fully. So
that's so beautiful. It's a great way to end. I do want people will, I'm sure, want to connect with you. We'll put everything in the show notes as well.
All the things.
But let's spout them off. The socials, website, when people can expect your next book, all of that stuff.
Sure. So I do a weekly newsletter. I always like to tell people, like, if you want just little tidbits, I just do like a coaching question, a moment of inspiration, like an intention. So that's called Real Talk. So you can find that on my website, NicoleUnice.com/Real Talk. And I've got a book coming out next year called Not What I Signed Up For. Can't remember the subtitle. It's about finding courage in a season you didn't expect, basically. And it's all based on the biblical story of Joseph. So really excited about that. Doesn't matter where you are in faith. Like, it just applies to what does it look like to walk through a season that you really never would have wanted. And that comes out next year. So I'm excited about that. And my name's really uncommon, so it's easy to find me on all the socials. So you can find me there.
Absolutely. And again, all in the show notes. And I'll say it again, the miracle moment. I would encourage people in the meantime, while they're waiting for your next one, to pick that one up. Nicole, this has been just wonderful, delightful, valuable. Thank you very, very much for
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.